Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I am Tamara Johnson. Sheely, good morning. It is Saturday, the 30th. It's the last weekend of the month. Oh my gosh. I just can't believe how quickly 2021 is escaping us, literally. Well, I'm just glad it's not 2020, right? I'm just glad it's not 2020. Let's see where my trusty co-host is this morning, Mr. David Slavin. Good
Here I
morning,
am.
David.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
Yeah. Yeah.
How
Yeah.
are you?
Oh, hanging in there.
Hanging in
Uh,
there. Robbie's here. Good morning.
David,
Good
you don't
morning,
use your
Robbie.
good morning, Tamara. You don't use your phrase like a loose tooth anymore. It's unusual.
Yeah. Hanging in. The other one I just heard is hanging in like a hair in a biscuit.
Ooh.
Ew.
You can keep that one, David.
Collecting. I'm collecting Southern expressions to integrate myself more into the local uh, cultural environment.
You
Oh
don't
yes.
stick out as much as the Yankee. I'm a
Yeah.
Yankee.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's hard to pry loose from that, um, but I'm trying anyway.
Yeah. Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning. I've been, we're moving into this new Biden administration, everybody, and started a broadcast on Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays on YouTube called Keeping Up with Congress. And just watching the bills that are coming through this legislature and, just trying to pay attention to everything. And one thing I take a lot of interest in beyond reparations, because of course I am watching HR 40 and S40. Cory Booker has now introduced Senate Bill 40 over in the Senate that duplicates HR 40, but there are some edits that need to happen. Um, we're real clear that this is just a study, but there's some edits that need to happen to both of these bills. So I'm paying attention there, but I also pay special attention, David and Robbie, to food and air and water. And today I want us to talk about land because you keep hearing these buzzwords and it pisses me off. Affordable housing, affordable housing. What happened to home ownership? What happened to home ownership? Out the window, Robbie. Out the
Bye
damn
bye.
window. Bye bye. No, they don't want you to own land. They don't want you to have, have your own piece of America.
Self
It's
sufficient.
all,
Wealth
yeah,
creation.
yeah. No wealth creation and affordable housing.
Well,
As
not
long as
now, because they've
not now.
already acquired it all.
And we're gonna talk. I'm gonna let you dive into that because I know you know all those details. But I just want to lay the found, just kind of set the stage here that it bothers me to see those words, and it bothers me to hear elected officials talk about affordable housing. Affordable housing. That means if I got some place to work, that means I'll have somewhere to live. So there's some correlation there with the way this economy is moving. No, no, I want to own my land. I want to be self-determinant. So, David, go ahead, Rob. I'm gonna let you jump in because I know this is totally your wheelhouse when we talk about land ownership.
No, I just want to make sure when we chat about it that we discuss who has become the largest landowner now, which would be Mr. Gates. Yeah,
Yeah,
it,
I'll actually show that article in just a second.
great.
David, you have some inside information. Good morning, Jamar. You have some inside information about Forsyth County. Like all of us know the story of people being run out of Forsyth County. Like that is, you know, go ahead, David. I'm gonna toss you that ball.
Well, it's relevant because there was an I don't know what to call it exactly. A young black man raped a young white woman, according to this, in 1912, in the summer of 1912. Three other black people were arrested. One of them, a woman, uh, who knows what extraordinary pressure she was put under, claimed to have witnessed it and even Anyway, point is that that by September they had dragged the white population of Cumming, Georgia, had dragged this kid out of the jail cell, shot him, dragged him around the courthouse, and hung him up on a tree. The other three people were brought for trial to Atlanta. The two men were found guilty, and they were hanged in Cumming before a crowd of probably half of the total population, white population of Cumming, in October. Maybe 8,000 people were present at this public execution, which was not much different from a lynching. The At that point there were about 1,000, about 10% of the population was African American, and in Cumming and in the Forsyth County, and black people were told to get out of Forsyth County, under penalty of armed terror attacks on them. So many of them sold their land at in forced sales. They owned a couple of thousand acres around Cumming, and those people who were managed to get some money out of it, was 1/4, 1/10 the value of what the land was worth. So they were put into forced sales. Many people were just fled. They couldn't even sell, and they moved down to Atlanta. There were several things that consequences and implications of this. One of which was that I did not know until I looked over this book from 2007, Buried in the Bitter Waters, by Elliot Jaspin, who I think was an AJC reporter at that time, and he did this in-depth research about racial cleansing in counties all across the South. This didn't just take place in Forsyth; it took place in dozens and dozens of places all across, from Arkansas, and South Carolina and Mississippi. So, in other words, that's one thing that was happening. First of all, it was happening all across the South, and black people lost land or were forced to sell out and move out of these counties. And one of the things that Jaspin did was that he looked at the census records from 2010, from 1910 to 1920. And what you find is that from that 1910, the black populations in all of these counties were going up. And by 1920, they had plummeted. So we know that there had been a racial cleansing that went on in those counties just on the basis of the census records. Second thing that's important is that it didn't just occur in Forsyth County. There were these racial cleansing at the same time in late 1912, early 1913. There were the same kind of racial violence and intimidation in Hall County, in Cobb County, in other words, all across North Georgia. And if you want to know why that area of the Atlanta region was lily white up until very, very recently, up until the last decade or so, that is the source of it. The racial cleansing of all of those counties, including Gwinnett, Cobb and Gwinnett, Forsyth, Hall, and all the way up to Whitfield. There were plenty of black people that were living up there. There were about 10% of the population in most of these counties in 1910. By 1920, they were almost all of them were gone. And the final, the NAACP began to have protest marches in 1987 in Forsyth County, and they were met by, overwhelming racial hostility, animus, the N-word used by people who were trying to march and protest and raise these issues about what happened in Forsyth County. The other thing is that there is a break in the tax records in 1912. During the whole Jim Crow era, there were two tax rolls. One was for black people, and the other one was for whites. And what you find, there were two different tax rolls. Black people couldn't vote, of course. They couldn't serve on juries. They couldn't do anything to protect themselves legally from financial and economic predation. But the other thing that happened was that there were black properties incoming in Forsyth County that mysteriously shifted from the black tax rolls to the white tax rolls, all during this period of time. So there is a considerable amount of land in the area of Cumming where people have $750,000 houses now, that there is no clear title coming from the out of the 19 teens and 20s to that land. There's a break between the title that some of this land had that was on the black tax rolls, and when it appeared mysteriously later on the white tax rolls. So the deeds and some of the deeds are when Jaspin and other people began to look at it, the deeds have a record or describe an entirely different piece of property. So it's you can't get any clearer than this about the need for reparations on the question of land. This is just outright stealing, on the basis of terror, of a terror movement that developed all across North Georgia. So this is not a simple matter of, this one incident in Forsyth County. And by January 2013, all black people had been forced, to leave by the white, mobs. It's a grounding in the whole historical way in which that, hundreds of billions of dollars of property is, it has shifted over from black to white across the entire swath of North Georgia. And I'll yield the floor to Madam Robbie Caban in a second, but there's another aspect of this that I'd like to bring up later on, which is the whole transformation. What is happening demographically now in Georgia that has created this? For example, the Biden Warnock Ossoff electoral victory. There's a big shift that's happened, and I just read something about it that's very, very interesting to explain what's going on, and it fits in with what Robbie has been talking about gentrification and these electoral political power shifts and how they relate to gentrification and other and the in-migration of folks from the West Coast and from the Northeast. You're mute, Robbie.
Sorry, I was taking notes. So what is it? What's the connection with the gentrification and the influx of East Coast and West Coast?
Well, it has to do with the fact that people can sell houses, in the Northeast and on the Pacific Coast, and even if they've only got half of their sale in equity, they've got an enormous down payment or nest egg to buy down here. We think the prices are high, but compared compared to the New York suburbs, or or Needham, Massachusetts, or or the San Jose and places around around the Bay Area. I mean, we're bargains, and there are a lot of people who are doing that. And moving into the area, including plenty of, as you point out, African Americans who are part of this in migration of house rich, economic migrants into the area, and they wouldn't be able to do that if there weren't the jobs here, of course. But tech jobs,
Yeah.
and all of that upper strata of I would call them working class, but what everybody else calls middle class, or a lot of people call middle class, and they're the ones who have been they and Latinos and Asian Americans are the ones who are creating the demographic shift of secure upper so-called upper middle class, but upper working class folks that are moving in. At the same time, it's creating another phenomenon, which is that the people who are voting for Trump, and I think this is something I didn't take down the guy's name, but this is in the Boston Review, and it's who's voting for Trump. And it confirms a lot of the things that I've already read, which is that this is not white working class people. The people who attacked the Capitol on January 6th, they're not white working class people. They're people
we talked about this because white working class people don't have the money to go there.
Yeah, they couldn't take off from work.
If they were working, no, they can't even fly there. Whatever the case may be.
Yeah. So this guy, this Boston Review article.
David, before we go too far into the Trump and the white working class, let's bring Robbie back to land, real estate, home ownership.
So, unfortunately, everything David describes is completely accurate. We've actually gotten some progress in this last decade in terms of becoming clear on restrictive housing covenants and how the U.S. basically, the entire MLK speech, the undergirding of white America and housing covenants, restricting, redlining, keeping people of color, specifically African Americans, out and directing them to areas that became heavily industrialized, polluted, and then got divested in. So as David notated, there weren't jobs for people to protect themselves. And then consequently, there were other traumas, again, inflicted, seemed like plans, plotted, however you want to phrase it, by the U.S. government, whether it was the war on drugs or, the war on poverty. This was, constant negative impact to Black communities. While on the opposite end, the mostly northern side, which if I looked up Forsyth, it's all on the north side above 285 and Hall and Cumming, which is continuous, throughout the country. You always hear, South Side Chicago, South Side Baltimore, et cetera. So you had this division between a flourishing component, which was predominantly, white, specifically because of the restrictive housing covenants that got invested in. So real estate taxes fund quality schools, education. And from your education, you're going to go to a better school, whether it's, a Ivy League school or something like Penn State or whatever the case. And that is the trajectory. And then of your life, right? And how much you're going to be able to live well. And then, of course, you factor in social currency, who gets hired. So you had one group of people who already had come out of severe trauma with slavery and not being provided all of those benefits, and where that with the Caucasian group moved to are people of color who moved to the opposite trajectory. And in essence, the wealth creation component of land and home ownership, which is why I became very interested in it, it is something that can be used to double down. You use it to borrow against and send your kids to college. You use it to invest in business. You use it, becomes a wealth creator. And so it has literally doubled down, as David said. And then people, if you look at the country, you have the West Coast, the East Coast, both of our coasts became very valuable. They were gentrified. Basically, I came from the South Bronx, everything got bought up, everything close to the nucleus of the cities, meaning Manhattan, became more expensive. So when those people liquefy, whether it's the West Coast or the East Coast, they do come with serious, substantial cash, liquid, and can purchase, a house that's $500,000, without blinking, because they're coming with that liquidity that obviously has a historical context and is very much along racial lines. So the justification, for, I think, various forms of reparations, so you can leverage yourself, whether it's monetary form or lands or the ability to purchase down payment or education, or stock even, so that you have a balanced portfolio and can stabilize yourself the way that other people have. I will say that Atlanta, although our elected officials like to, claim, if this was a problem specifically for Atlanta, it wouldn't be happening all over the country. That is a very clever way to dodge that Atlanta did not plan. Atlanta failed to plan, because when you watch what happened on the North Side, and when you watch what happened, on the East Coast and the West Coast, and you see that happening, and you see more people coming to specifically your city because of an international airport, which systematically that is, whether initially it was railroads, that created commerce, and then it became, shipping. So whoever controlled the ports, was a global industry leader. And afterwards it became the airports. So when Atlanta, Hartsfield became an international airport with triple expansion in 2010, City of Atlanta really at that point had an opportunity, and that's this discussion of legacy residents. And the reason it's pivotal into what you're bringing up, Tamara, to what you're talking about in terms, David, of gentrification in the past, which now it ties all together, is because legacy residents who are predominantly Black, lower income Black, were not protected. They remained divested in, the jobs were not there, their credit wasn't there, as through no fault of their own. And instead, City of Atlanta invited tour busload, the Beltline tours, the real estate tours for profit, through civic engagement, through the NPU structure, through neighborhood associations that report to the NPU, the neighborhood planning unit that goes to Atlanta City Council, that legislation, those, the letters of support. And in essence, they decimated the lower income, population below the south side of I-20, which was the dividing line, who all are on their way to Clayco, Clayton County, Henry County, South Side, and are now wondering, well, gosh, how are we going to have people work when we're getting rid of all the poor people? But really, you wanted to get rid of all the poor people who were predominantly Black, because you wanted higher income taxes from the East and West Coast, who were imported and welcomed into Atlanta proper.
So let me ask you a question. Do you think Atlanta just kind of, you said they did not plan. Do you think some of this was
intentional?
Intentional.
It would be hard to not deduce by action. Now, I will say Commissioner Tim Keene, and that is the planning commissioner who remains in his position, gainfully employed, salary, a tax-funded position, reports to Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms. Keisha Lance Bottoms came out of the Reed administration, and these situations were evident, and both Mayor Reed, former mayor, and Keisha Lance Bottoms were completely made aware of what was occurring in Atlanta to legacy residents and failed to act. And ironically, they're both attorneys. So, I don't know how someone with a legal background, with the exception of qualified immunity that politicians have, along with our police officers, because we can't sue them personally. That's why it was so baffling to me when Joe Biden was making statements like, I'm in awe of Mayor Bottoms, because anybody who has come here to Atlanta who lives on the South Side would know that is a shocking statement. That means that Joe Biden doesn't know what's happening. And I think one thing that's really, really telling, or it means that the Democrats just wanted the 2 seats to benefit, one, a DNC, a Democratic National, Committee, to keep, this tax funded, comfortable lifestyle that they live, which I'm not saying the Republicans are any better. In fact, they're just as worse. But this brings into the argument of option A and option B, and where does that leave us? Because we knew what was going on. We just had no other option. And really, the Daniel Blackman, nails it, because Department of Ag, if you really care about climate change, why wouldn't you want to have the position of Department of Ag? But there's no discussion on the part of the DNC that Daniel Blackman is claiming voter fraud. None. Zilch. It doesn't make the news, nothing. And I think, this situation with the stocks and Reddit, and I know it's a separate conversation, is very telling. I don't know if y'all have ever been set up, but I have been set up in my life on multiple times, and I can smell a setup now. You can call me a conspiracy theorist all you want. That's fine. I can take it. But Microsoft, who has contracts with the government, Bill Gates, is now the largest landowner. Feel free to show, Bezos is in there in bed with our government right now on affordable housing, whatever you want to call it, workforce housing. He pays, we should be so thankful, $15 an hour to Amazon warehouse employees, which really $15 an hour times 40-hour work week. What is that? 400, 500 times 4, $2,000 when he's a billion gazillionaire now, and we made him that off of government contracts. These 2 people became wealthy beyond off of government contracts. And you add in that he's in the affordable housing mix, you add in Microsoft owning lands and the ability to produce food, which is going to be a scarcity, and then add in how social media can basically take anybody out, take anybody in, and how our media is compromised on both sides. And that is you want to talk about a Democratic trifecta, that's a trifecta. So, and I'm not trying to paint a bleak picture. I just think we need to stop exalting, radical people like MLK when we're not free thinkers ourselves. We love to quote him and honor him, but he was a radical thinker. He was a free thinker. He questioned the US government and said, this is what you have in writing, and this is what's happening in reality. And what happened on those stocks and Reddit is a telltale sign that is controlled, that Wall Street is controlled. It is a mechanism. And at any time, this technocracy or this technology can be pulled from you if it doesn't work the way they want it to work. And when I say they, I'm talking about the 1% and our 9% enablers who are really our politicians. And you can read whatever you want because it's compromised. Our media is compromised. You literally have to read articles and pick apart what's in there and what's missing, because they may not lie to you, but they can leave it out. So that's my soapbox. That's all.
No. You said a lot. This is these higher taxes. So going back to the city of Atlanta, and they wanted this influx of new buyers and new purchases because
new higher taxpayers.
Yes, new higher taxpayers.
Yes, they were welcomed. They were recruited. You can't allow brokerages to use an illegal trademark like the Beltline, right? SEO, search engine optimization. There was a brokerage that used the Beltline team. The Beltline was trademarked. That's a federal project. It's a federal funds. There's a profit arm and then a nonprofit arm. And they allowed a huge bulletin, a massive billboard, in West End. It said the Beltline team. That was illegal. The Beltline allowed it for like 4 years. Who basically got them to leave it alone? And I'm telling you why this matters. The local gentrifiers who controlled our local media, who controlled creative loafing. I'm trying to think of the guy's name. He was a writer, and he was heavily involved in planning. And so this construct of the NPU system and it not being a democracy, goes from the very bottom layer of our functioning, civic engagement, our government, to the top. And, we're sitting here, we're funding this. We're funding rocks under bridges with homeless people. We're funding ignoring the homeless people till the politicos come to town. Now they're at the Ramada, for I don't know how long. We're funding a political circus. And I'm sorry, until somebody in Capitol Hill says, I will not accept my $174,000 a year salary. I will not use the company gym on the American taxpayers because our company or country is in crisis. I will only use this much because this is what I need. Then maybe I'll believe one of them. But Nancy Pelosi is out there trading just the same. Okay, so is her husband. Okay, she's a billionaire, millionaire, and we're starving. We can't even get $2,000, and we're supposed to be glad. We're supposed to be glad that Joe Biden's. I'm not glad. I'm not thrilled. That illusion of an inaugural, it's wonderful. People were well dressed, wearing pearls. I get it, and I get when people are beaten so badly that they want to feel good about images. I get representation matters, but I believe this is a setup. I believe that this was disaster capital. I believe that all these areas that these protests, whatever, were allowed, where everything got damaged, they're now being gobbled up. The valuable assets that you're talking about, buildings, commercial, are being sold for nothing to billionaires to turn into affordable housing. Why? Because he's going to make sure his workers get to work. And correct, yes. And universal income is going to make sure, just like that Robin Hood app was cut off. We don't like what you're doing. We don't like how it's working. We're not going to let you sell. You're not going to get your paycheck. You're not going to get the medicine you need. And that is a ridiculous amount of control. And people who are in a comfortable position, fortunately, God bless us all, we should talk about it. We all should be talking about it, tweet about it, share those stories, and wonder what the hell is going on.
Robbie, you preaching this morning. I don't know, David looks uncomfortable over there.
Well, it's definitely not a happy,
Preach, Robbie, preach.
I understand, David, it's uncomfortable because you're like, could this really be happening? Could our government really be doing this? Well, add it up.
What did you say? What was that last?
The last part, add it up.
Oh, add it up.
However you feel.
There's a longer arc to this, and it stretches back to the World War II, the GI Bill, the federal subsidies to the big banks, and the finance, insurance, real estate sector of the economy. That what we're now on the we're in like a second or third stage of what's happened over the course of the last 50 years and 75 years, and I'm both in agreement with you about how the racial divide has taken place, but also there are lots of European American working people who are are unable to take advantage of those opportunities, as well as African Americans. Now, they're not in the same position by any stretch of the imagination, because if they were in the same position, they would be getting together. They would be working in concert, and that would be the end of the system. But the way that it stands, I think the working people who are European American have connections with that. They have closer connections with people who are truly upwardly mobile and in the middle class, compared to African Americans, who have a much thinner layer of upper middle class people that they can rely on to help get them cushion them from the worst shocks of the economy. So that's one of the big differences between African American working people and European American working people. But there's and in the 60s, one of the things that happened was that the black people were displaced from the South, and the whole Great Society and civil rights actions of the middle 1960s forced black people out of the South because they couldn't get jobs anymore in the South. Sharecropping and the cotton economy was mechanized and what they call chemicalized. In other words, pesticides and fertilizers and all of that other stuff. And these huge cotton picking machines were introduced. The like combines, like how they grow wheat. It was very difficult to figure out how to mechanize agriculture because the cotton boll has all of these seeds in it, and you had to figure out ways to do that to get it from the plant to the cotton bale through machinery, and that wasn't done from the 1880s down to the 1960s. But in the 1950s, the federal government began to subsidize farm loans to landholders. If you were a sharecropper, you couldn't take advantage of this, right? Because you didn't own the land. So that's the beginnings of the end and it coincides. Ironic. That's the beginnings of the end of sharecropping, and it coincides with the rise of the civil rights movement. So the civil rights movement came at the worst possible time economically, because the landholders, the cotton plant, landlords no longer needed their labor, so they were less able to exercise power, and we have stories of this over and over again, of white citizens councils buying one-way tickets for people to leave areas of the South and go north. And in the North, there were no jobs. What there was in the North was welfare. And so, in the inner cities began to pile up with poor people who either had very low income jobs working in the garment industry, for instance, in New York, and the better paying blue collar jobs were in the suburbs. Black people couldn't get home loans to buy housing in the suburbs,
Right.
so the inner cities became tax. What do you call it? Um, uh, Whatever the opposite is of tax producing, they were draining tax incomes, and that's where you get that dynamic of working class whites in the suburbs hating people on welfare, even though they're part of the same working class, uh, and complaining about their taxes, which was the advantage that the Republicans began to use to mobilize suburban voters. This is the whole thing about fiscal responsibility, and all. It's code language for white supremacy and for keeping the suburbs white, and not paying taxes to provide people with better housing, with better schools, in the inner city. So you begin to get that in the 60s, and into the 70s. You get the basis for white republicanism. For the Republican Party to become a white people's party. And the working class, the European American working class folks who were engaged in that, saw their white interests, their racial interests, as being as trumping, to make a pun out of it, as trumping their class interests, because they were homeowners and this, that, and the other. And they had pensions, and from the UAW and all, and other uh, corporate union partnerships, and they threw black working people under the bus. We're not going to pay taxes.
David, this goes into why reparations.
What's that?
This goes into why reparations are so important. it's so important. Do y'all hear back feed or is just me? I'm hearing
It
myself.
goes. You're breaking up. I didn't hear what you said. Something about reparations.
No, I said this reparations is so important. Let me mute your mics, and I think it might be my computer. But this is why reparations is so important. You talking about like the taxes and white people. If you want us to you want to eliminate your taxes and you want to lower your taxes, give us our reparations. Give us our land so we can be self-determined. You want to get us off welfare, these social programs, give us our reparations so we can own our land and we can be self-determining. Give us a stake in America so that we don't have to be so dependent on the system. And I'll turn your mics back on.
Well, Robbie, you're muted.
Sorry. Give is a very generous word for you, because
we are owed reparations. We are owed it. Pay your debt, America. Pay your debt to people who have built this land off the blood, sweat, and tears. Pay your debt to us, America. Then you won't have to worry about us, your taxes. You don't have to worry about us on welfare and these social programs. Pay us what you owe us. Give us our land back, as the title of this broadcast is today.
From my understanding, too, I believe public housing, which was it was segregated originally. And there was a cost to it. And it was after it became non-segregated that it became a non-cost. You didn't pay. And that's where it was allowed to, just decay and dilapidate. And the people that I believe, I don't necessarily want to, create another racial divide there, but from my understanding, I don't know where the people who were originally paying in the public housing who were white, when they left, I don't know if they went to labor union jobs. That's what it looks like if I had to guess, but I have not researched that, sufficiently. And hopefully, now that these folks have submitted legislation on a study, even though I don't know what there more is to study for reparations, which a study is going to cost money, which is really what needs to be. But hopefully it will be enacted, before we go into further financial crisis. And, whether people want to talk about it or not fully on the media, there is a financial crisis. I thought, David, when you were saying, the 75 years, you were, going to go into the economical component, of exactly. Because if the dollar goes, and loses value due to inflation, what's the check going to be worth? I mean, we're selling off, we're selling off assets to billionaires on loan. That's what Bezos's affordable housing is about. And when you look at those covenants, there have been workforce housing, there have been, affordable housing before, but the way that those contracts or agreements are structured and the lack of follow-up has only benefited the developer, whether they're a nonprofit developer or not. Nonprofits pay high salaries to their directors too.
David, they want to hear from you, David. Jump in, David.
The financial connection is really, I think, crucial, because what happened in starting with the GI Bill was that, not even really starting with that, the segregated housing, the Housing Acts, the Federal Housing Acts of the 1930s did this as well, redlining, segregation, all of these other things. But by guaranteeing loans to the private banks after World War II, the federal government, and as I kept pointing out, the GI Bill was written by this guy, John. I'm blanking on his name right now, but the senior congressman from Mississippi, John Rankin. He did this with, I think, malice aforethought, and that is that by putting all of these loans into the hands of private banks, he made sure that Black people couldn't get loans. because there was no anti-discrimination laws on the books. The Federal Housing Acts of the mid '60s created non-discrimination that was never really enforced. Certainly not in the white suburbs. Restrictive covenants were eliminated, but not the informal arrangements and the kind of racial violence that took place to protect white suburbs, whiteness. But the other thing that it did, that it gave the banks essentially risk-free capital, because the federal government was guaranteeing those loans. And on top of that, and you correct me if I'm wrong about this, Robbie, the way that 30-year mortgages are set up, the banks get their cut, up front. In other words, the interest on the loans is paid heavily in the first 15 years, and you really only get equity in the second 15 years of a 30-year mortgage. So the banks, it's not quite the same. It's kind of a sliding scale, right?
No, you're correct in that the principal, you don't pay off your principal initially in the part of the loan, that the interest is paid towards the back end. So due to compounding interest, that's why you wind up paying, if you buy a $100,000 home, like $300,000 over the course of 30 years. That being said, there's ways to tweak it, which we can talk about afterwards. And there's also ways to kind of get ahead of a market to purchase when you know what the city or development is doing, because there's going to be a rise there. It's the same way people trade on Wall Street to a degree.
Okay, so what you're saying is that there is insider trading, in effect, that's going on.
What I'm saying, and I had hoped that, what I'm saying is that the city, our municipalities invest in certain areas, and if we had planning that was really holistic and inclusive, they would be able to determine, when you place, for example, 4 massive city incentivized projects like Tyler Perry Studios, which was 300 acres, like Mercedes-Benz with Arthur Blank downtown, Tyler Perry, in between South Atlanta and East Point, which is a South Side city. Porsche headquartered, next to a triple expansion airport, and add in, there were 4 of them. With Georgia State that I mentioned, the Georgia State by Peoplestown, when Georgia State acquired the former Braves Stadium. So those were 4, that was a quadrant of 4. If you look at it, it becomes literally a rectangle. And Southwest Atlanta is in the middle of that quadrant.
And so Georgia State also took that the dormitories from the 1996 Olympics. They now because I taught at Georgia State, and I was seeing the transformation of Georgia State from a commuter school into this, what it has become, primarily an urban
elite
dormitory based 4-year college and a research. It's not quite a research one university, but it's it's close to it.
Let Robbie make her point, because I want to see where she was going with that. Where were you going with that, Robbie?
And it's not shocking what was done with Georgia State. There are a lot of economies, right? It becomes an economic arm, just like Athens, to some degree creates a financial component, right? Or the college at Athens. So the quadrant, the development that's incentivized by the city, they knew by inviting people in of more means, of more income, with locals not having credit or jobs because they were divested in, what was going to happen. When you put in those massive 4 city incentivized projects and you don't have a community benefits agreement, meaning a contractual obligation to the legacy residents who don't have credit due to divestment, who are renting, who can easily be foreclosed on when predatory people come in, whether it's wholesalers or cash investors or real estate folks or brokerages. When you just unleash this, it's not hard to deduce what's going to occur. Yeah, and that is what occurred.
The thing that I'm adding in here is that there is this financial superstructure that is, you're talking about, not wanting to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I agree with you that there is something that's going on behind the scenes, which is the huge banks and this finance, insurance, real estate sector of the economy, which is controlled very, very much from the top, which has more power than any other sector in the economy, and really, really determines which areas of cities get slumified, which areas get gentrified, and they are planning. There's corporate planning that's going on in these 200, 300, 500 billion dollar range, in which they are saying, okay, we're going to let this area go, and it's going to deteriorate, and then people will then in 20 years they'll be buying up cheap property, right? And we will be there to lend them the money to do that, and we will make the rake off from that process. So that's been going on, since World War II, and the banks have always been able to ride on top of this. They are the renter class, the rentier, as the French term for it, in which they get a rake off no matter what, no matter whether the
it's our 9% politicians that allow it, and I don't believe
they enable it.
Well, they bail them out.
They're not in charge.
Hold them accountable. Our judicial courts do not hold them accountable, and I don't believe that Joe Biden is clever enough to figure it out.
Oh, I disagree with that. I disagree with that. I think
Joe Biden is
I agree with you, Robbie.
Politician. He facilitated some of the problems that we have now. He was part of the Obama administration, where the original bailout happened in 2008.
Okay, he's also part of the mass incarceration as well. He's also part of the mass incarceration in the 1990s and 1980s.
Why do you think that
he passed the crime bill? So, I mean, I don't think that it's a matter of him being not knowing what's going on. They all know what's going on. They just don't. The only thing that could counter the power that these folks at the top have is a mass solidarity movement of working people. And we don't have that. We don't have that because of the system of social control and the fact that white leftists have not figured this out. The ones who are stupid, who are blind and are ignorant and don't want to know are mostly, the white left, including many people, of color who are in that environment.
I can't even say that people are stupid, and this is why. Our media doesn't even give the full story. We do not teach people to critically think in education. Our food supplies are questionable in what they're even made of. So when people are struggling to survive because they have had
I'm talking about people in the Sanders movement, people in the who supported Elizabeth Warren. I'm talking about the Democratic Socialists of America. That's who I'm talking about. They do not have a vision in which they're paying a lot of attention and support, and they're getting support from Biden on issues like environmental justice. Mm-hmm. But environmental justice is only one aspect of what the environmental crisis is. But the other side of the environmental justice is the fact that there are millions, tens of millions of European American working people who own their own homes, who are just barely struggling to get by, and they see that environmental justice and environmental change is a threat to them, which it is not. So and as long as that left, the Sanders, Democratic Socialists, Warren folks are not addressing those people and their misunderstandings about what's going on in the economy, they're gonna be part of the base that supports the Republicans. And that's what's happening. That's why this thing that I said about the Trump supporters are not the working class is really, really important, because there are people now, because I'm bringing this back to Wimbish and his run for the district attorney's office in the 4 counties, Spalding, Pike, Upson, and Fayette. That's a crucial step. He's a Democrat. Yeah. And he's working primarily with the Black community in those 4 counties to win that district attorney's race. But there are lots and lots and lots of poor whites who live in that area. They're not, you pointed out yourself that working class Black people from the legacy communities in South Atlanta are moving into those counties. And that's part of who Wimbish is going to rely on for his his voting base of support. But all of the leftists in Atlanta, and in DeKalb County and in Gwinnett County, who have been working, to transform those counties, working with Stacey Abrams, all of these white leftists, they need to go down there no, I disagree with that. I'm talking about the left wing of the Democratic Party, who is primarily made up of European Americans, with a smattering of folks like Black Lives Matter and all those folks. They need to go down into Fayette, Spalding, Pike, and Upson counties.
They don't want to go down there.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
But why do you believe in somebody who doesn't believe in what you're talking about?
Well, I understand that, Robbie, but that's what I'm saying. They are failing in their responsibility. There are so many promissory notes. It's not just about reparations. There are promissory notes that are owed to Black people from white leftists, from the progressive movement of this country, which has failed to do its duty to organize European American working people to fight against the forces that are on the
organized. They want them in the new public housing that Amazon is going to do.
Who is the they? You're talking about
1% that control our 9% gatekeepers.
I'm talking about people who are
elected officials. That is the they. That is the they, David.
I'm to an entirely different group of people. I'm talking about radicals, white radicals, who have not gotten the message that they have a special responsibility to organize white working people. They are not the they that you were talking about, Robbie. Not the same they. Okay.
Who's a white radical? You mean someone like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren?
Yeah, with hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people on.
I don't have any information about that.
Sorry, that's my speaker. Sorry about that. A lot of people would say, even though I know Bernie looks very radical in comparison to, the choices that we have, it's not that radical. Okay.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Robbie, we are having a disagreement when we agree. I'm saying
what we're disagreeing on. Here's what we're disagreeing on. Perhaps, and I'm sorry if I'm wrong, I think you think that the DNC actually cares about the populace.
No. That is not what I'm saying.
Okay.
That is not what I'm saying. I'm not talking about the DNC. I'm not talking about the Biden administration. I'm not talking about centrist Democrats who are all in the pockets of corporations. I'm talking about people who are pretending, who are deeply committed to challenging the ruling elite, and they have failed to do it because they can't win over white working people. Sanders' movement has hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people involved in it.
Fail. Okay, Sanders actually had an effective movement. The DNC did not let him have the ticket. Okay, the DNC, just like they cherry-picked the candidate. Yes, I'm sorry, Dave. That is what I honestly believe. They don't want a populist candidate because that does not contain paying for everything that we're affording their comfortable lifestyles. I don't care what Nancy Pelosi wears in a kente cloth. She is just as complicit.
Yeah, but you're not dealing with what I'm saying here, Robbie.
Okay.
Robbie, I'm saying that the Sanders movement
tell me
has
one more time.
failed,
What am I
not because they were stopped by the DNC. They were stopped by themselves. They did it. They did it. Of
We're going
course,
to
the
agree to
DNC
disagree.
well,
So
of
David,
course,
so
the
what I
DNC
think,
was going to
what I
stop.
think, David, let me
Yeah.
time out, y'all. So what I think David is saying that the white blind spot that exists in the DNC, that exists with the Democratic Socialists, is their fault. It's their fault why these white Republicans are so far to the right. They need to go gather their folks, and they haven't figured out how to do it yet, and neither has David. David is still trying to figure out how to reach white working class, how to reach these people. So I totally get it. But guess what, y'all? We're at the top of the hour. This has been a great broadcast. Look, they said all of us need to run. Somebody got jokes all in the thread today. We all need to run for office. That's what they say. But I am Tamara Johnson Shealy. Every week, every Saturday, we give voice to issues, activists, and activism right here in the great state of Georgia. You can find me at tamarashealy.com. You can find Mr. David Slavin right here on Facebook at Acknowledge the Divide. And Miss Robbie Caban, you can find her at robbiecaban.com. I'll see you guys on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday on YouTube as we keep up with Congress. This is a great discussion this week. I can't wait to next week. But David, you might not be with us next week. It's the first month. It's the first Saturday. So we got something good coming up, me and Robbie. Robbie, we got something good. We got something stirring in the pot for next week. All right, everybody. Have a great week. We'll see you guys next Saturday.
Solidarity forever means privileges never.
Power to the people.
Bye.